Let me be honest, this story isn't easy to tell. It's something I never imagined I'd share with anyone, let alone strangers. But here I am. I guess some things just weigh on you until you have to let them out. I'm 47, divorced, and raising a teenage son. Life feels like it's on an endless loop. I work night shifts as a nurse, the kind of job that forces you to see the darkest parts of people in life. After a while, you just become numb to it. The odd hours, the constant fatigue, and the things you witness, none of it shocks you anymore. My world outside of work. It barely exists. I wake up, go to work, come home, try to rest, and repeat. That's 5 nights a week, every week. But there's one small thing that helps keep me grounded, bowling. Yeah, I know it sounds old-fashioned, but it became my escape. I joined a local league last year, mostly just to have something that was mine. It turned out I wasn't bad at it. In fact, I got good enough to qualify for a tournament being held 3 hours away. I'd been training for months and was excited to do something for myself again, something that reminded me of who I was before the divorce. But just as I was getting ready, reality hit. Who was going to watch my son? He's a teenager, sure, but he's not exactly the type you leave alone for a weekend. The last time I tried that, one of his friends decided to crash a truck into my garage, no joke. My first thought was to ask his dad to take him for the weekend, but of course, he was scheduled for military guard duty. Just my luck. I didn't want to miss the tournament, but I couldn't leave my son home either. So, I decided we'd make a weekend out of it. I packed our things and booked a room at the hotel where the tournament was being held. It even had a pool, which I figured he'd enjoy. The next morning, I got up, stretched, and went to wake him. He was still passed out under the covers. When I shook him gently, he groaned but didn't put up a fight. I told him I was heading to get some breakfast and asked if he wanted to join. He mumbled something about pancakes, so I knew he was awake enough. We went down to the hotel restaurant. The breakfast wasn't anything fancy, rubbery eggs, dry muffins, the usual. He piled his plate high with pancakes and syrup while I stuck with an omelette. We sat there quietly, enjoying the calm. I asked him if he wanted to do anything before I had to get back to the bowling alley. Without hesitation, he lit up and said there was a mall nearby with a GameStop. He'd been looking for a specific game and thought they might have it. Now, malls aren't really my thing. They're loud, crowded, and always end up making you spend more than you planned. But my son doesn't ask for much, and this seemed important to him. So I agreed, and we headed off. He found the game he'd been searching for, an old used title priced at nearly $60. I couldn't believe it. For a second, I hesitated. That kind of money for a scratched-up disc. But then I saw his face. He was glowing, genuinely excited in a way I hadn't seen in a while. He doesn't ask for much, so I just sighed, pulled out my wallet, and paid for it. He grinned at me, wide and real, and in that moment, it was worth every cent. We spent the next couple of hours just wandering the mall, window shopping and watching people. It was easy, light. It reminded me of simpler times, when he was younger, when things weren't so complicated. I held on to that moment, not knowing how quickly things were about to shift. Later that evening, I returned to the bowling alley for the final stretch of the tournament. I felt good, rested, connected after spending time with my son. But apparently, my game thrives on stress and chaos, because I bowled worse than I had in months. I slipped from second place to fifth. It was frustrating, but I tried not to let it ruin my night. One of the women from my home league, Sarah, ended up winning the tournament, and honestly, she deserved it. She'd put in the hours and worked hard for it. After the awards ceremony, a group of us decided to go out to celebrate. They invited me along, and I agreed, on the condition I wouldn't have to drive. Luckily, the bar was right across the street from our hotel, which was perfect. We ordered drinks, shared stories, laughed too loudly, and for once, I let myself relax. I had more wine than I usually allow myself, and by the time I made it back to the hotel room just past 1 a.m., I was tired, tipsy, but genuinely content. My son was already asleep when I walked in, stretched out under the covers, the TV still flickering. I changed into my pajamas, brushed my teeth, and climbed into the other bed. The room was dark except for the glow of the screen. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, my thoughts drifting from the tournament to the quiet moments with my son. Something felt unsettled. I couldn't quite put my finger on it. Around 3 a.m., I heard a soft sound in the hallway, voices. At first, I thought it was just other guests being loud. But then something about the tone, the familiarity of one of the voices, made me sit up. I peeked through the peephole. My stomach dropped. I saw my ex-husband. And not alone. He was with someone I recognized instantly. My sister. They were standing too close, talking in low voices, her hand on his arm like they'd done this before. My body froze. At first, I thought maybe it was a misunderstanding. Maybe they ran into each other by accident. But when she leaned in and he brushed hair from her face, the pit in my stomach hardened into something else. Something sharp. I backed away from the door, my mind racing. Were they seeing each other? How long had this been going on? Did my son know? Suddenly, the past made more sense, the way they acted at family gatherings, the distance between my ex and me even before we divorced. I sat on the edge of the bed, breathing slowly, trying not to wake my son. This wasn't just betrayal. It was betrayal from two people who were supposed to have my back. My family. I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. And by morning, everything had changed. I opened the door to our room, still warm from laughter and wine. My son was asleep, the soft flicker of the TV dancing on his face. He looked peaceful, almost like he used to before everything got so complicated. I tiptoed into the bathroom, changed into my pajamas, and quietly slid into my bed across the room. The room didn't spin, not exactly, but I definitely felt the weight of the night. Still, I was content. I'd had a good day, a real one, not just the kind you survive out of habit. And I was proud of myself for making space for joy again. But sleep didn't come. I lay there, watching the TV without really watching it, my mind bouncing from the tournament to my son, to the little things I missed about my old life, before the divorce, before the exhaustion. Somewhere around 3 a.m., I realized I'd left my phone charger in the car. Groaning, I slipped on my shoes and headed out. The hallway was quiet, the kind of stillness that only exists in the early hours of the morning. I made my way to the parking lot, the night air sobering me more than I expected. As I neared the car, I heard voices, faint but familiar. I stopped, my breath caught in my chest. I recognized one of the voices instantly. My ex-husband. I ducked slightly behind a pillar and followed the sound. There he was, standing under one of the dim lights just outside the hotel lobby. He wasn't alone. Beside him, laughing softly, her hand brushing against his arm, was my sister. They hadn't seen me. They were too wrapped up in each other. The way they stood, too close, too comfortable, sent a cold flush through my body. I watched as he leaned in and whispered something, and she smiled in a way that used to be mine. A lump rose in my throat, and for a second, I couldn't move. This couldn't be what it looked like. It shouldn't be what it looked like. But denial fades fast when betrayal is right in front of you. I turned, walked quickly back to the room, and shut the door as quietly as I could. My hands were shaking. My son stirred in his bed but didn't wake. I sat at the edge of mine, staring into the darkness. So many memories, so many holidays, all the times I defended her, supported her, trusted her. All the moments I still tried to co-parent peacefully with him, for the sake of our son. And now this. It wasn't just a betrayal of trust. It was a betrayal of blood. That night, I didn't sleep. I just lay there, watching the morning arrive, feeling like something had quietly shattered, and I'd have to figure out how to move through the broken pieces when the sun came up. I lay my head on the pillow, pulling the covers up to my chin. The TV murmured in the background, some late-night movie I wasn't really watching. Sleep refused to come. My mind spun with thoughts about the tournament, about my son, and about how life had quietly slipped into this routine of fatigue and numbness. Around 3 a.m., I heard rustling from the other side of the room, my son shifting under the blankets. I glanced over, just to make sure he was okay. He was curled on his side, the soft flicker of the TV casting a pale light across his face. He looked peaceful, lost in sleep like someone without a worry in the world. For a moment, I smiled. It reminded me of when he was little, when I'd sneak into his room to check if he was breathing, just like all new parents do. The years had gone by so fast, too fast. He was growing up, and despite all the tough days and rebellious phases, I still saw glimpses of the little boy who used to hold my hand in public without a second thought. But the silence that followed wasn't comforting. It was the kind that makes you notice how alone you feel in your own skin. I was tired, but it wasn't just about sleep. It was a tiredness deeper than that. One that came from carrying everything for too long without setting it down. I turned back to the ceiling, my thoughts drifting again, how lonely it felt to be the only adult in the room, the weight of single parenting, the bitterness of betrayal from years past, and the aching question that haunted me, when was the last time someone took care of me? I closed my eyes and tried to let it go, tried to push the thoughts away and just breathe. I reminded myself, I'm here for him. I chose this. I'm doing the best I can. That mantra, quiet and steady, carried me until sleep finally crept in, slow and heavy. But even then, it wasn't restful. It never really is when your heart is carrying more than your body knows what to do with. I pulled the covers up to my chin and stared at the ceiling, the soft hum of the TV filling the silence. My mind wouldn't settle, not after the wine, not after the day. It had been good, better than most. A rare moment of connection with my son, laughter with friends, the taste of something close to freedom. But now, in the quiet of the hotel room, the weight of everything I carry crept back in. The kind of loneliness that doesn't show up until the world goes still. Not the kind that's solved by people or noise. The kind that lives in your bones. At some point, I glanced over at my son. He was fast asleep, his mouth slightly open, the TV light flickering over his face. He looked younger somehow, softer, and for a moment, I felt that old ache, the one every parent knows, the ache of watching your child grow up while you stand still, stuck in some echo of who you used to be. I rolled onto my back and shut my eyes. That's when the guilt crept in. Not about anything he had done, but about me, about the life I'd built that felt so small, about the exhaustion that never really went away, about how sometimes I didn't know who I was outside of being mom or nurse. The wine had loosened more than my body, it had loosened memories I didn't ask for. Longings I thought were buried. Regrets that buzzed like static in the corners of my mind. I sighed, pulled the pillow tighter under my head. This wasn't about him, it was about me, about how easy it is to lose yourself, and how hard it is to admit you're lost. And somewhere in the haze of guilt and fatigue and flickering light, I promised myself, tomorrow, I'll try to remember who I am outside of this room. Tomorrow, I'll take a step back toward the woman I used to be. Even if it's small, because sometimes the bravest thing you can do is just make it through the night. I stood up, my legs strangely unsteady beneath me, and walked quietly toward his bed. The room was lit only by the soft glow of the television, flickering across the walls like distant lightning. I paused at the edge, unsure why I had even gotten up, maybe to check on him, maybe to ground myself in something real. He stirred slightly, shifting under the covers, his face flushed in sleep or maybe something else. There was a heaviness in the air, a feeling I couldn't quite name, not fear, not dread, but something murky and hard to place. In that moment, I felt the weight of everything, the wine, the loneliness, the years of being more nurse than woman, more caretaker than person. I wasn't thinking clearly, just standing there, watching my son sleep, realizing how much time had slipped through my fingers. He was growing up, and I hardly remembered the steps in between. I turned away quickly, the room suddenly too small, too quiet. I returned to my bed, heart thudding in my chest, not from what I saw, but from what I felt, how utterly alone I was, how lost I had become in the routine of surviving. Sometimes, when life grinds you down long enough, you forget what normal even feels like. That night was a reminder. A jarring one, but a reminder, nonetheless. Greater than I'd spent months preparing for a small but meaningful bowling tournament, my one escape from the heavy grind of night shifts and solo parenting. My teenage son, moody but manageable, came along for the weekend. It was supposed to be a quick trip, nothing more. The morning after the tournament, I returned to the hotel room earlier than expected, exhausted, emotionally spent. I opened the door quietly, not wanting to wake him. That's when I saw something. Not scandalous, not criminal, but devastating. My son was on the phone, pacing, whispering fiercely. "I can't keep covering for you, Dad. She deserves to know." My heart dropped. I stood frozen, realizing I'd just walked in on the unraveling of a secret I hadn't known existed, a secret between my ex-husband and my son. Betrayal didn't always come from lovers. Sometimes, it came from the people you thought were trying to protect you. That weekend became a turning point. Not because of the tournament, but because I saw my son, really saw him, for the first time as someone burdened by adult secrets he shouldn't have had to carry. I knew, deep down, that something about what had happened wasn't right. Morally, emotionally, even logically, it all felt out of step. But guilt is a strange thing. It crept in like fog, wrapped around me briefly, and then vanished, leaving behind a low hum of curiosity, maybe even anticipation. I kept telling myself, This can't happen again. I tried to reason, to make sense of what had unfolded, of what it meant for our relationship, for the boundaries we thought were solid. But the truth, the lines had already blurred. And the more I dwelled on it, the more I realized, I wasn't sure I wanted them back. It was like carrying a secret weight, dark, electric, and deeply personal. Yes, the shame and the guilt still lingered, but they weren't alone. They danced with something else, something daring. Something I hadn't felt in years, the thrill of possibility. The sense that maybe, just maybe, something had been awakened in me. And that scared me, because suddenly, my mind wasn't focused on regret. It was imagining what might happen next. What if there was a next time? What if the rules we'd always followed were quietly rewritten? It wasn't about anyone else anymore. It was about me, the thoughts I couldn't shake, the feelings I didn't want to admit. I wasn't planning anything, not exactly. But the what ifs kept slipping in like shadows beneath the door. And that's when the most unexpected part surfaced. Not shame, not guilt, but curiosity. So, let me ask you. If you found yourself caught between who you were and who you might become, what would you do? Would you pull away before it changed you? Or would you lean in, just far enough to see what was really there? Thank you for joining me on this deeply personal journey, a glimpse into the silent battles we often fight between morality and curiosity, between restraint and desire. Stories like this aren't always easy to tell, but they remind us of our shared complexities, our vulnerabilities, and our unspoken thoughts. If this story resonated with you, or even made you pause and reflect, then I hope it served its purpose. A heartfelt thank you to all our listeners, readers, and loyal subscribers. Your support encourages authentic storytelling and allows us to dive into the emotional, often untold, layers of real human experience. We appreciate every like, share, comment, and subscription. You are the heartbeat of this platform. Disclaimer: this story is a work of emotional fiction inspired by common experiences. It is intended for mature audiences and is meant for storytelling and reflective purposes only. All characters and scenarios are fictional or dramatized. Viewer discretion is advised. We do not promote or condone unethical behavior in real life.